Welcome everyone as usual for another session of Coffee O'Clock. And in these sessions, what we usually do is for the first half an hour, we have some guest speakers or individual guest speaker who introduce their work to ourselves, to a crowd. And in the remaining 1 hour, we do a casual discussion regarding that particular talk or any other topics related to that work, related to the work of the speaker. And today we have not one but three speakers, three guest speakers with ourselves, and they are pretty young and they achieved a lot. And we thought that it is our job to put on light on their achievements. So that's why they needed to be recognized. And all of them are third year's bachelor students, like final year bachelor students. And we have Ishmam Shah, Turbashu Chatterjee, and Arnav Das with us. And Ismam Shah is from Bangladesh and he's studying bachelor's in University of Dhaka. Turbashu is from Maulana Abul Kalam Azad University of Technology in West Bengal and in India. And we have Arnav Das, who is a student, bachelor student in Kazi Nazrul University, and they are going to talk about the glassy dynamics and how we can observe glassy dynamics using quantum computers, or more specifically gravitational quantum eigensolvers. So yeah, I think it is the right time to give the floor to the speakers, and please start.
Okay, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And so I'll be starting with the slides once I figure out how to share this thing. So hopefully you guys can share look at what's on my screen right now. Right. Okay. And the idea is that please ask questions. If you don't understand something, please feel free to ask questions. But at the same time, we are also novices in the field. We are not researchers or anything like that. We just found this project to be fun, and we just went on with it. And let's just move over to the slides. Okay. So we have Shah Ishmam Mutashin. We call him Ishmam because for personal reasons, which I won't get into, but uh, he's a senior year chemistry undergrad, and he works with all the physicsy, all the nice chemistry and of our entire project. Then we have yours truly. I basically I basically do the math behind the projects, and we have Arnav, who's the prodigy coder. And this is actually true because we actually named him Prodigy Coder in our group chat. Okay, so off to Ishmael to start the entire thing.
So hello guys, I'm Ishmam and I'm from Bangladesh. I'm majoring in chemistry with minors in physics and maths. So basically this project was done for IBM Qiskit Hackathon, Qiskit Europe Hackathon, which was a month-long hackathon where we had all the teams had to work on a specific research-based project. So usually what we felt for usually hackathons are for 1 or 2 days, right? So what we usually feel at this time is like you can't work on a more grander scale, right? So you have only 1 day, so you can only have you can work on a very small idea and you just have the whole day to yourself to implement that part. So this was one of those hackathons which we really enjoyed because we could truly flex our intellectual capabilities and had and could work on it for a prolonged period of time on a project that we love. So one of the main motivation behind choosing this project, there were other uh, candidate projects that we considered. So one of the most uh, this is the line, the first quote that you see here by Philip W. Anderson, who is a Nobel laureate in physics. The deepest and the most interesting unsolved problem in solid state physics is probably the glass transition. So as I'm from the natural science background, so these type glasses are a very fundamental, as Philip Anderson is one of the most interesting problems in solid state chemistry and material science, right? So when you hear it's an unsolved problem, definitely you are more incentivized to solve that problem, right? Because you will be one of the first persons to solve it. And it is true, like even to this day, there is not like one agreed upon one like that fits all the possible exceptions in the model. So there is no exactly one single model that explains everything, right? So in after, so this was our main motivation, that we are going to since we have a like longer period of time, we are going to work on something that's like grand or novel, right? So so not only is glass found in like natural sciences, but we can see it in outside of physics fields like combinatorial optimization, neural networks, and even in biological systems and community models like in voting patterns and others. So another thing that was one of the main challenges of the problem is that there is no literature on simulating glassy systems on quantum computers, and even on for classical stuff, you had like a limited to like 10 to 15 papers on how to actually simulate glass on a like a reasonable time frame and in a reasonable that shows enough glassiness. So it was a very hard problem to begin with, and when we started, we didn't know if we could have solved it, right? So for Turosha, could you like, yeah, thanks. So our objectives for this project was basically to, as the title suggests, like to, if we could actually, if the simulation of glass on quantum computers are actually possible. There were a lot of like theoretical papers that talked about like they talked about simulating glass, but none of them was on quantum computers. But those are like classical Monte Carlo, and even those are very, very incomplete. So we wanted to kickstart this new field, right? Where there are a lot of intractable natural science problems which are like very theoretical demanding and very resource heavy, and if they are it's like actually solvable on quantum computers, and that means even before the fault tolerant quantum computers came in, and even for the Nix era, right? So for that we had so that we could other people could follow our work, we already made the Qiskit module, and we have a like a plan to. Yeah, Rishi will be. So Rishi commented like if we could comment on what is glass to get people started. Yeah, so we'll be talking about in the next slides. So also, so we have already made the Qiskit module, and we'll be making our tutorials later. So let's start is about the definition of glass. So basically, the definition is pretty arbitrary, to be honest. So it's a middle ground between a liquid and a solid, right? So they are the thickest and the gooeyest of liquids, and the most disordered and unstructured of rigid solids. So liquids, as you know, can flow, and solids, as you know, are rigid. So glass is one of those stuff which are more like the flow is like very slow, right? Basically, liquid is like if in simple terms, glass is a liquid whose flow is so slow that it looks like a solid and acts like a solid, but it's not solid as well, because solids have periodicity, and liquids and glasses don't have periodicity. They are disordered. On to the next slide. So we still haven't understood what glass is, except for the fact that it's something in between like a solid and in between like a liquid, right? So definition is still pretty arbitrary. So it's for in molecular terms, for in chemical terms, like when we freeze a liquid to some solid, a liquid undergoes what we call a phase transition. Like the molecules line up on top of each other, and they are stacked, and they are in a very orderly manner, and they become solid, right? When you like exceed the melting temperature. So, but in glass, this stacking is nowhere to be found. The periodicity isn't there. Instead, what happens is that basically molecules just move slower and slower until they are effectively not moving at all. So you can't see any movement in like with your eyes, but there is actually movement, right? So you have to have a microscope or scanning electron microscope and other stuff to actually see the like the molecules moving. Like it's just like in solids there are jiggling, right? The molecules jiggle, but in for the case of glass, there is actually translational movement, not only just a rotational or vibrational movement, right? So they are in a strange state between liquid and solid. So for now, what we have understood is the glass is something between liquid and solid, and that it has some movement, and and that it doesn't have any periodicity, that it is very disordered. So as we can see from this animation, so first we have liquid, right? So as you see from the clock, that's at the right top corner of the liquid, the box with the where we have our liquid state of the matter, right? The clock is moving very slowly, but the liquid has like the molecules are moving very fast. So it has a tremendous flow, right? It's not in one place, and so it's moving. So if we cool down, we have either it becomes super cooled liquid or it becomes crystal, right? Which is our usual solid that we all know. So for supercooled liquid, we see that the clock is moving much faster than liquid, but the molecules are moving slower. So we can say that in supercooled liquid, the movement has slowed down, but in crystal, it's completely stationary. That it has become that it has it has become stacked and it doesn't have any movement. But so when the supercooled liquid becomes glass, we say that it has becomes it has minimum space in between the molecules present, and it has some movement, but the movement is very slow, even though although the clock is moving much faster than the supercooled liquid ones. So if we look at the two boxes between glass and crystal, you see that both of the clocks in the top right corner is moving very fast, but the crystal ones are not moving, and they are in a very periodic manner, like one after another, and in a very symmetric fashion. But in glass, there is some movement, in very tiny movements, translational and rotational movements, and also they are very disordered, right? You can't make any sense, or like there is no order to it. They are at very random places. So this is the only these two parameters, that it is a glass is moving, it has some flow, and also is disordered. These are the two main characteristics of glass that you can use to discern it from a liquid and a crystal. On to the next. All of them are hexagonal shaped, all the individual units, and they are placed one after another, and you can actually make it's very symmetric. To the next slide. But if you consider it for glass, like if you not consider for a crystal, if you consider it for a glass, you say that you can make any sense out of the the structures. Like there is still silicon and there is still oxygen for silicon dioxide that we know for like a conventional glass. Like conventional glasses are made of silica, but you can see local order, like the silicon dioxide, like the units of glass are still hexagonalish, but there is no like whole periodicity towards the system, like there is no symmetry. So although the atomic scale structure of glass shares the characteristics of supercooled liquid, but the glasses have like mechanical properties of solid. So basically what we have understood from all this is basically we have understood nothing except for the fact that glasses are in between state between liquid and and crystals, right? So also please do feel free to ask any questions, because this is a very complicated topic, and like as we said, the definition is still pretty arbitrary except for the fact that the flow is very slow and that it is disordered. So also there is one misconception, or like we don't understand what we from people who don't actually study the subject, is like when we could talk about glass, we actually talk about glass that we see on our windows or on fancy utensils and sculptures. But glass is pretty much evident in everywhere, like in every field there you can find glassiness. So basically you can find it in our bodies through the cellular Potts model, which we will be discussing later in our talk, and in ant colonies, which is another complex biological system, in the flight of the migratory birds, in spin systems. So for physics guys, this is one of those matters of interest. In the structuring of NP-complete problems, this is something for math and CSE guys. In combinatorial optimization for the computer science dudes, and there are others as well. So to the next slide. So what we have understood from the previous slide is basically that glass is glass, that we all know, like everyone knows what glass is, right? Everyone has read the definition of glass. We have spelled out glass. We have in primary schools, we have written the spellings of glass during like English class, right? So everyone we know what glass is, that glass is glass, but glassiness isn't just in glass. So it's a very complicated thing. Even the definition of glass is complicated as well, right? You can find glass everywhere, but we still don't know what glass is. So how do we look at this glass, right? So basically what we have said in one of our previous slides is that basically you can find glass everywhere, even in biological systems, even in statistical mechanical systems. So basically, if we wanted to look at glass reasonably in using our current computer architectures, we have to look at some things that can simulate glass, right? So you can, if you can say glass in biological system, you had to simulate in a quantum computers through some models. So what we have found is that all of these models are basically adaptive complex system, and all and these. So what are adaptive complex systems? So these are basically, you have like a statistical mechanical model where the individual components of the system contribute to the macroscopic properties of the system, right? So what we see here is a what we call an emergence, an emergence of complex behaviors that arises spontaneously from relatively simple elements. So each simple elements will have its own characteristics and will behave in its own way, abiding by its own rules. But when you have a lot of these small simple elements with its own with its own rule, all of them combine together to bring out a new characteristics of the system, which isn't evident in the like the simple elements itself. So all simple elements comes together to bring out new characteristics. So this is what we call emergence in the field of physics. So as we wrote here, the individual components have their own moves, but the moves are regulated in such a way that they must lead to a minimization of the energy of the system. So in this case, the rules that we set, the penalty functions that we set for our energy to be minimum for our system, for our glass systems, are basically the Hamiltonian, and the extremum values of the Hamiltonian gives us that value. So on to the next slide. So basically, for our project, so there are many. So we have talked like there are many places where we can see glassiness in many complex adaptive systems. But for next era quantum computers, there are only you have only a handful number of qubits that can work reasonably, right? So we had to find some models where you can simulate glass on in a reasonable amount of time. So out of them, there were two toy models. The first one was basically transverse Ising model in longitudinal field, so which is a complex statistical mechanical spin system where we see the magnetization and phase transitions. So turns out in that particular model, we basically look at the disorder that we talked about in glass systems. And so for biological case, we also wanted to look at cellular post model. So in biological, in this model, we basically looked at the metastabilities of the system. And so these are the two parameters of glass that we looked in our two models. And usually cellular post model is used to model tumor growth, cancer cell metastasis, and the clotting of blood in the longer run. On to the next slides. So here we have another meme. So basically here is the this is one of the memes that we prepared. So here we see that it's weird, right? Glass, the definition is arbitrary. That it's one of the unsolved problems. You can actually explain glass within reasonable mathematical equations, and that there are a lot of theories out there, but none of them can explain all the parameters of glass, right? So things are very weird, and it has been weird for a while. In fact, it has been weird for about 8 years since the first theory of glass came out, and it is continuing in this direction. And even in our presentation as well, you will find out more weird stuff that we have worked on, and there are many things we don't understand even now as well. So now Turbashu will take over and we'll talk about the Ising models and its derivation that we have made for our project.
Okay, thank you, Shwan. Okay, so now that we now know what are we dealing with, right? This huge piece that we're dealing with. And the first things first, we want to be able to. We thought that not us, but many people thought that this could be modeled very efficiently using something called the Ising. For those of you who are very familiar with the Ising model, then welcome to your domain. And for those of you who are not, it's basically this model where you have these
your voice is cracking.
Discrete variables. Okay.
Is that anything?
Is it better now?
Yeah, maybe go a bit closer.
Oh wait, hang on.
It also looks.
Hang on.
Seems
is it better?
windy, so maybe. Yeah, try
now.
Yeah, please go on. Thank you.
Okay, so now the Ising model is basically like this model where you have these discrete variables, right? And these basically will represent your magnetic dipole moments of this, atomic spins that you talk about, and that can be encoded in a +1 or a -1 state. And these spins are, well, they're arranged in something called a lattice, right? Where we'll come to the lattice, and we'll see that how are these lattices very important. So imagine that, imagine that you are arranging these, uh, matchsticks, right? And you're arranging each matchstick in the right angles to each other, and you're making this network. And each black head of this matchstick will represent your spin that can be either +1 or a -1, right? And that's basically your Ising model lattice. And the neighboring spins that agree to have a lower energy than those that disagree, the system tends to have the lower energy. But an external stimulus, disturbs this entire system, and thus creates the possibility of different structural phases. And this concept is, very, well exploited when we are dealing with QAOAs and whatnot, in combinatorial optimization, where this is basically the mixer Hamiltonian, and that basically tells us that, okay, so if you apply this transverse field to the Ising model, then what happens, right? And this model allows us the identification of phase transitions, which is a simplified model of reality. As Ishmael mentioned, that we really don't have a model that explains everything about glass, but well, this goes very, very close, right? Okay, so mathematically speaking, so consider lambda of lattice sets, each with the adjacent sets, example a graph forming a d-dimensional lattice. For each lattice site k belongs to lambda, there exists a discrete variable sigma k, such that sigma k belongs to +1, -1, as we said, representing the site spin. Spin configuration being sigma is equal to sigma k, k belongs to lambda is an assignment of spin value to each lattice site. For each adjacent site ij belonging to lambda, there exists an interaction jij. This energy configuration of the entire sigma is given by the Hamiltonian function, which is dependent on sigma, given by its sigma is equal to minus this entire thing. So, yeah. So what did we get out of that, right? And we got nothing out of that. And here on out, well, Darius has come to your rescue, and he's saying that you're on a need-to-know basis, and we won't get to like where and how do we get this entire mathematical structure, but I'll try to walk you step by step how we came up with this. Okay, so back to the model, right? So we have, by some magic, we have got our Hamiltonian, right? This is our Hamiltonian. H is equal to J sigma I, sigma these Z, sigma Zs, which are acting on the nearest neighbors, on the two nearest neighbors. And the J is the interaction term, which means that with what strength do these models or these two spins interact with one another. Now let's just apply a transverse field to the Ising model. And this is very, very similar to the QAOA, right? Where we apply an Ising, a transverse field to the Ising model, and you will notice right off the bat that this term right here is basically what we call as the mixer Hamiltonian, right? And that in essence we have got this term of these how the model acts on a standalone basis, and now how does the model act when we apply some sort of transverse field to the model, right? And now we come to the longitudinal part, right? And that is another sigma Z term, right? And this is basically the entire Hamiltonian, and that's pretty much it. You don't need to go into why and how and what, because well that's pretty complicated, and you can pretty much I think you can write a 1,000-page book on the Ising model, and that will be still not that will still be incomplete, right? So here's our Hamiltonian where we are working with, right? And for the chain Ising model or the one-dimensional Ising model, so this is our the spin configurations. So let's say that we have some sort of spin configuration which is up, up, down, down, up. So this can be really anything, right? This can be up, up, down, 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 or up, down, and so on and so forth, right? And the basic idea is that how do we find the ground state energy of this entire system, right? So kicking our quantum computing instincts, and we have the variational quantum eigensolver to find this entire ground state of this 1D Ising model. And for our Ising model, we use 25 qubits for a 25 long spin chain. And we've used our X and our Y rotation blocks with no entanglement, because apparently entanglement doesn't really count, or doesn't really, bring an effect to the entire system. And we use the Kobel optimization, right? And then we have the code. All right. So this is our entire Hamiltonian for the nice little problem that we call the one-dimensional Ising model for 25 qubits. So it's pretty neat. Now you can pretty much, you can just take it up and plug this into the system, and it's really very very easy to replicate our work or something. But we've given you the entire Hamiltonian, so feel free, right? So confuse screaming ensues in the process, and then we have the results, which Ishmael will explain.
Yeah, so after figuring out the Hamiltonians for the first 2 weeks, and it was very easy. I tell you, it was very very easy. So it didn't actually take 2 weeks, but yeah, I mean it did take 2 weeks, but yeah, you can try it out for yourself and see if it takes.
Sarcasm intended. You should
Yeah,
mention
sarcasm
that in
intended. Yeah, sarcasm intended. So it was very easy to construct the Hamiltonian, how we will actually encode in quantum computing terms, right? Because you have a lot of example for classical models using Monte Carlo, but you have none. You have some for Ising models, but you don't have anyone that accounts both of transverse Ising model and also with the longitudinal field, right? And also even for 2D cases, the amount of complexity ensues, and we'll get to that later. So now we talk about the results that we have found after toiling for 2 weeks for nothing on constructing the Hamiltonian. So as we can see, this is basically an energy diagram of an 1-bit Ising model on 25 qubits. That is, we have 25 spins, and each of the spin can be either 1 or -1 or up or down. So we have seen from the graph that we have here. So we increase our BZ, which is the longitudinal field, and BX, which is the transverse field, from 0 to 2 for each of the cases. So if we see here, for the extreme cases of 2, BZ and BX equals to 0, we see that the energy is minimum, it's about -9.5 or -9.6 or something like that. But for if we take the other extreme case, which is BX equals to 2 and BZ equals to 0, the energy isn't as low, right? It's basically around the ranges of -4 or something. So there is a the energy minimization goes double due to the application of longitudinal field and transverse field. So what we could infer from this graph is basically that the role of the transverse field is basically primarily due to the induced quantum effects, right? Not and the role of the longitudinal field is basically to induce to lower the minimum to lower the energy of the system. And as we will see in our later results for 2D, so this for this in our project we first implemented the 1D model because it's simpler to implement. So this was the first hint that we could use both the fields, that both the fields contribute to glassy for the glassy dynamics to emerge in our Ising model, and that you need both of the fields, and one of the fields is you need for lowering the energy, and the other you need to induce quantum effects. And combining these two fields, you get glassy dynamics, and you can only get glassy dynamics or glassy characteristics in your system just by using either one of the fields, right? So moving on to the next slide. So when we basically implemented the first the one-dimensional Ising model, and we found out that the graph actually gives us the hint that we need both of the fields to induce glassiness in the system. We were on we were very happy at that point of time, and yeah, we are going in the right direction. We got a hint about that. But why did we need to do it for 2D? So basically, the behavior of 2D Ising model changes from 1D because due to the variations in the number of neighbors and the interaction between them in the 2D lattice, right? So in the 2D lattice, we have two interactions. So for we have three interactions exactly, actually. So for spins on the edge, so on the spins in the extreme edge or in the corner, you have two Ising spin neighbors. But for the spins on the edge, for each edge, so there are 4 edges in your 2D lattice, right? For the spins on each edge, you have 3 interacting spins, neighboring interacting spins. But for the spins in the middle, you have 4 interacting neighbors, right? So and all the interacting neighbors were calculated between two spins were calculated using von Neumann nearest neighbor search, which Orno will later describe on. So here we can see in the we have a graph for a 2D lattice where we have implemented our Ising model with up and down spins. As you can see in each of the four corners, the Ising sites have two neighbors, right? For each in the corner, and each in the edge you have three. If you move on, then there's 3, 1, 2, and 3, as Toros is showing showing, and for all in the middle there are 4 neighbors, right? Yeah, so there are 3 different variations of neighbors that you can have for 2D, but for 1D cases, you almost for all of the spins except for one of the in the start and the tail, you have 2 neighbors, and in 1D you for the one spin at the start and the one spin at the end, you have only one neighbor, as is is the terminal spins. But except for it, for all the cases in between, so 23 of the 25 spins has two neighboring spins, and only 2 have only one spin. But here you have there are a varying number of spins, and so the whole system and the whole emergent behavior changes as well. And we will now look at the results of that 2D Ising model. Onto the next slide, Torosho. So before we go to the results, let us show out the code. So this is actually quite nicer than 1D, right? Than the 1D Hamiltonian. So you can basically anyone can screenshot this and copy it from us, and you can give out the code here, the Hamiltonian here for 2D for free, and you can run it on your system if you can. So this is it's basically gibberish at this point, and it's more like an art, as we can show in our next slide to Rashu. Yeah, so this is basically basically this is our system when they basically first saw our Hamiltonian when he gave it for input, right? Is that an 2D Ising model Hamiltonian, or is that an ASCII art, right? Because basically, right, it's more of a texture at this point. You can basically use it to you can print it on your T-shirt, and some people will think it's the new hip cool design. Then then yeah. So basically, going back to the more here, the most complicated stuff begins, right? The results on the 2D Ising model, because basically the results of the one-dimensional Ising model was pretty clear. You need transverse field for quantumness, and you need the longitudinal field for lowering the energy. And the graph was pretty easy, right? The two extremum shows different minimum energy. But for the 2D Ising model, so basically we varied the number, as for the one-dimensional Ising models, we varied the values of the two fields, and we saw we watched the spin configuration of the Ising model. So this is basically a 4x4. So this is basically 5x5 2D lattice Ising model. So for the black spin, 6x6. So for this is for 36 qubits. So for this basically model, the black boxes are spin down, and the yellowish boxes are spin up, right? So as you can see, we have written that on the top of the spin configuration lattice 0 0 1 0 1 0 1 1 0 1 1 and so on. So as you can see here, for BZ equals to 0, that is when the longitudinal field is 0, the value is set to 0, and for transverse field equals to 2, we see that it has a perfectly antiferromagnetic spin configuration, right? So antiferromagnetism is basically something that you can see in magnetic domains, where as the name suggests itself, it's basically anti, right? For each spin that has a value of 1, or has one value, the other neighboring spin will have the other value, and the opposite value, right? And you can see it here, for each of the spins, you have one black, one yellow, one black, one yellow, one black, and yellow, and if we relate this analogy to what we said before in the case of crystals are symmetric, right? I think it's good for people to look at one of the earlier slides too, Rashu, right? Could you show us the one for silicon dioxide and the silicon dioxide slide where we saw the periodicity one, right?
That's at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So,
That's
so I'll have
beginning.
to go through. So I'll come back to that at any point if anyone has any doubts. So if that's okay.
Yeah,
because I'll have to search through the entire 29 pages.
I think
Right.
it's I don't know why it's taking so much time, but yeah. So basically, this is like if you remember that slide, like we talked about a whole lot about like periodicity and symmetry. Like in this case, antiferromagnetic it's purely symmetric, right? One up, one down, one up, one down. So but if we like change the values a little bit, and could we move for the next slide? We see that. So for the previous slide, we saw that we have like 0 as value for transverse field. But as we could see from our results from one-dimensional Ising model, we at that point of time, we said that we need both of the fields to induce glassiness, right? And we'll see it for this case here. So when we have like for this simulation, we had the transverse field set at 2 at the value of 2 for this model, but we here in this case we increase the value of longitudinal field to 1 from 0 as we as seen in the previous slide, and here we see a disordered phase. So for the first part of the the first two columns, we see that it's purely antiferromagnetic, and for the next column, the third column, the half of them is antiferromagnetic, but the rest portion of the 6x6 layers, we saw that there is some local moments of ferromagnetism, right? So for for the first row, the fourth, fifth, and sixth shows like up, yellow, yellow. Then below that we say like black, yellow, yellow, black, and yellow. That is the number of spins shows the same like the same values, right? 1, 1, 1, or up, right? Yeah. All the interactions were 1. All the interactions were 1 for all the interactions between all the spins were set to 1. The J values were set to 1. So as we can, and after the so after the local moments of ferromagnetism is seen, we again see some since it is like the next architecture limited, we can only like see it for like a very limited amount of time. So we see a period of antiferromagnetism, and then some ferromagnetism, and then and then a phase of antiferromagnetism again, right? So disordered phase is basically a combination of antiferromagnetism and ferromagnetism. So after that, we continuing on from the previous slide. After that, we set the like BZ value, that longitudinal field value, at 1 constant as it was in the previous slide. But in this case, we like varied the transverse field to 0.5. So like we actually lowered the transverse field. But as you can see here, if we lower the transverse fields as well, as you could see in the as we have said before, like you need both the fields, and so you see that there is some disorderedness in laterally in the like bottom right portion of the lattice, but it's mostly antiferromagnetic, right? So it's somewhere between paramagnetic and disordered phase, and also antiferromagnetic. So it's a very in between of the 3 phases. So it's one of the like critical points, as you would say, between all of the 3 phases, right? So if we move on to the next slide. But then again, when you increase both of the like fields from like the ones you have showed in the previous 3 slides, like for BZ equals to 1.5 and BX, that is, if we may make the values of transverse and longitudinal fields both equals to 1.5, you say that there is absolute chaos. There is this is what we call paramagnetism, right? Totally random. So this is the interesting thing about glass. Like you are telling it's disordered, like there is no periodicity to it, but it's actually not fully random, right? As we seen in for molecular, like for chemistry class, right? For actual what we conventionally know as glass on wind domains, right? So basically you have hexagonal shapes of silicon dioxide, but so there the local moments are like basically preserved, but there is no symmetry during the whole system. So it's not totally random. So that's the difference between what we call totally random systems, or like totally random configurations, and disordered phase, which is a disordered phase for glasses, which is basically a combination of like antiferromagnetism and ferromagnetism, right? So if we move on to the next slide, which was our final simulations, we basically saw that. So for the previous slide, we saw that for BZ equals to 1.5, for that case as well, the longitudinal field was 1.5, and transverse field was 1.5 for the previous slide. So we for this run, we kept the longitudinal field constant, but we lowered the like transverse field. We see that it's again showing disordered phase, that is the combination of antiferromagnetism and ferromagnetism, as we see here. The first two columns shows antiferromagnetism, then the third, fourth, and fifth column shows some sort of ferromagnetism, and the last two columns show antiferromagnetism, right? So you can see it's still disordered, like, it's still somewhat random, but it's not totally random, right? So this is what we call the disordered phase, and which is, and as like it, if we like extend it for like bigger lattice, like 50 to 50 by 50 lattice, or like for 80 to 80 lattice, you could like see the effects more clearly, but current Nix quantum computers don't allow us to do it. But for now, it's a very good hint on like yeah, you can see glassy dynamics in transverse Ising models with longitudinal fields, right? So moving on to the next slides, which will be like narrated by Turbashu for the cellular pods model.
Okay, thanks. So well, the cellular pulse model is may be considered as a generalization to the Ising model. And well, here you have these cells, right? And all these, and for our sake, for simplicity's sake, and for sanity's sake, we have considered that all of these cells are very tightly packed, right? So imagine this. This is our, this is one type of cell. So 4 is one type of cell, right? 7 is one type of cell. 3 is one type of cell. 6 is one type of cell. 5 is one type of cell. 1 is one type of cell. 2 is one type of cell, right? And each of these types of cells are very jam-packed onto some sort of, lattice. And what is this lattice? Lattice is the area that we want to observe. Now, once we have these all cells, these will interact between one another, right? And the idea is that this is pretty similar, but on a generalized scale. Is that okay? So if we have this Ising model, and we have this generalization of this Ising model, then we should be able to see glass in this generalization as well. And there are papers that have hinted at this, notably one by Shadukha from TIFR. And he said that okay, what happens if once we have this entire Hamiltonian of this entire system? So they did this classically by considering Markov chain Monte Carlo, and they did this by evolving the state. So once you evolve the state, so let's say that this 7 becomes 4 again, and then this 3 becomes 7 or something like that occurs. So the entire shape of the cells will change, but the area will remain constant, right? And that's what Shadukha intended to do by altering and evolving the state one by one through Monte Carlo process. But what did we do here? So if you are going to simulate this entire thing on the quantum computer, so we said that okay, I don't care where this configuration ends up, I want to see the ground state energies. And the idea that we want to portray here is that we want to portray the metastability part of the glass, right? Which is one of the main characteristics of glass, as Ishmael said. So we just said, okay, so here's the Hamiltonian. If we just reduce it to this ground state, what are we essentially doing? We are essentially, instead of evolving one by one, using the classical approach that, okay, this cell goes here, evolves this, we are evolving the entire system in just one single step, right? And that will reach to its ground state in that exact moment, right? And similarly, in terms of maths, this is our Hamiltonian. Don't ask me how we got here. That's classified, right? That you shouldn't ask these questions. In any case, right? So here is this nice little Hamiltonian. So this is the area term, right? So each cell has some sort of area, and that will contribute to the total energy. And each cell has some sort of perimeter that will contribute to the total energy. And of course, it will have its own interaction terms. Or in here, this is basically the intercellular tension between the cells, right? This is basically the initial area, right? I'm sorry. This is basically the final area, and this is the initial area. So we are considering that okay, what happens if this gets summed up? The entire area terms get summed up, and what are the interactions between the area terms? What is this perimeter? And the same goes for the perimeter as well. What is the interaction between the perimeter as well? And now we want to see that what is the nature of interaction between the cells. And this is what we have done so far. And this interaction is again done by the von Neumann neighbor approach, which means that up, down, left, and right. And now, if we just come up with our VQE, basically this is going to happen. So for an interaction term equals to 1, the idea is that we want to be able to see that as the interaction term increases, there will be more disorder in the system. And this disorder is really hard to find. So we want to be able to this is the second order derivative of the rate of, or rather the rate of change of energy as it reaches the ground state, and how it fluctuates. So as you can see, for j equals to 1, the fluctuations are relatively it's simple, right? For j equals to 2, it gets a little more interesting, and for j equals to 3 and 4, well, it gets even more interesting afterwards, right? And that's a very crude way, albeit it is a way of saying that, of determining that, okay, glassy nature might exist in these systems, right? And that's
Okay,
basically it.
s-
And I
yeah,
will
so
hand it over to Arnav. Okay,
so
yeah,
before that, I
Ishmael
think
had to say
yeah,
something.
for before that, for explaining
Okay.
metastability, it's basically, so if you look at the
Right.
for the j equals to 3 and j equals to 4 interfacial terms, right? So basically what we mean by interfacial terms is basically the cells are like rejecting each other, right? They're trying to the repulsive forces are working and they're trying to be away from each other. So what we have understood so far from glasses right now is basically glass is nothing but a confused kid who doesn't know what to be. Like for molecular cases, it doesn't know if it wants to be like a liquid or if it wants to be a solid, right? And for spin systems, it doesn't know if it wants to be antiferromagnetic or it wants to be paramagnetic, or if it wants to be it wants to be antiferromagnetic, it wants to be paramagnetic, or it wants to be ferromagnetic, right? And even it's basically a kid when basically a confused young kid that behaves like this when someone asks him, do you love your dad or do you love your like mom more, right? He or she doesn't know how to answer, because one of the other answers is wrong, right? You can't say like you want like you love one of your mother or father more than the other, right? So glass is basically a confused kid who doesn't know what the system it wants to be in. So if that's basically what we call by metastability, right? It doesn't know what to be. Like, so it's near equilibrium, but it's never truly in equilibrium. And that's what we say for, like, if you increase the j terms, like the interfacial terms, the cells work against each other to be like, they don't want to be near each other, but it's a like as Turbas mentioned, it's a stack system, right? The cells has to be top of in each other, so the cells are actually resisting for the system to be in, like, to reach the ground state. And that's why when you increase the repulsive forces, it continues to move and move before it has to come to a ground state at some point of time. So as you can see, for j equals to 1 and j equals to 4, the j equals to 1, the minimum state is is reached relatively more easily, since the interfacial tension time is 1. So the repulsive energy is between the cells is not that much, right? The repulsive term. But as you increase it to 4, the repulsion increases and it prevents the whole cellular postmodel from actually reaching the ground state. So why it is in the middle stage, like what you call the metastable state, right? Where it is not, it pretends to be stable, but it's actually not. So it's basically a confused kid, or like a confused state. So it goes up and down till it reaches the actual ground state, but in between them there are like a lot of metastable states where the cells are actually working against each other against each other for actually our algorithm to find the actual ground state of the energy, right? So moving on to
guys,
that.
sorry for interruption.
Yeah.
Can you please move on the slides, because we can discuss about this like after this presentation.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'll be handing this over to Arnav now, and we are nearing the end, like 1-2 slides more. So
yeah, thank you, Turbasu.
So I'll be handing it over to Prodigy Coder. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so all of us have seen the Hamiltonian, right? And the thing that looks like ASCII art, and like none of us are going to write that ASCII art in an actual Python file to create the Hamiltonian, right? So what we proposed was a Qiskit module, not a Qiskit module, but a Python package that creates the Hamiltonian for us by just calling one or two functions. So here is the package, Qiskit_glassy dynamics. It's in our GitHub repository. And by just calling this icing function, icing sub package, we can access the functions like Ising 1D Hamiltonian to build the Hamiltonian and field Hamiltonian to build a field Hamiltonian, of course. And then we can combine them to create those ASCII arts. This code that's shown here is for creating the 1D Ising model. Okay. And Tuasu, can you go back to the slide where you go back to the slide where okay, this is package created by you folks. Yeah, it is created by us, and it is not published in PyPy yet, but like from GitHub you can easily install this package to your environment. So we'll put the link to our GitHub repository in the chat. Okay. And Tuasu, can you go back to the
Is there a way that you can the ASCII art wala package? So maybe not because it will take a lot of slides. So can we
okay,
just
okay. So basically this code is for 1D Ising Hamiltonian, and go to the next slide, please. Yeah. And this part of code is for creating 2D Ising Hamiltonian. So this Ising Hamiltonian that will be created would be for 5x5 lattice. And the field Hamiltonian is also again for 5x5 lattice for Z basis and for X basis and so on. And at the end, we are just combining these three Hamiltonian to create our final glass Hamiltonian. And once this Hamiltonian is created, we can just put it to our VQE and get the lowest energy states. And that's how we generated those graphs and those lattices with the disorders. Turbasu, yeah. So for future work, I guess Turbasu is the best person to.
Okay. So for we imagine like for future work, we plan to extend the size of the lattice for maybe 50 by 50 or 80 by 80, which is still very much pushing it because as we know for NISQ era that's not possible. And then what happens then if we investigate the interaction term, if we just reduce it or maybe increase it drastically, maybe we could also implement the kinetic Ising model, which involves the use of some sort of penalty function. And then we obviously have the Cobb-Anderson binary mixture and Lennard-Jones potential model for studying molecular glass. Then we have the Qiskit community tutorials, and how do we expand this entire Qiskit model? We leave it up to you, and for including new models. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And thanks.